Hey, thanks for clicking. I'm Rich. I build stuff. This is part 2 of my B-17 playlist. So, yeah. Today, I'm going to modify these pieces to accommodate those bits and answer the real question in life. How do I make all this extra work visible when I close that up? I have an idea.
Simply put, I'm going to fill the thing with modeling clay to preserve its shape, and then I'll be able to use it as kind of a support when I take apart the fuselage halves. So before that, though, I got an interior to modify, and before I really do it right, I got to look at my phone because I realized something. I'm doing this all wrong. So there I go, removing all my little other previous photo etchy bits and smoothing everything out, kind of erasing the knowledge of their existence, as it were, because, amongst other things, this plane had a lot of plywood, and if I'm going to, accurately do plywood, why don't I just use thin veneers? I mean, they use them for ships, why not, right? So, of course, now I got to make everything all nice and flat and smooth, and might as well make some things go at right angles because they should, and that's what I'm using that Dremel wheel for. And while I'm really at it, why don't I add that little space between bombardier and cockpit, that has some like tanks and things and stuff, and let you see it out the, side door. So that's what I'm carving this piece of plastic out to become. That Sharpie didn't trace too good, but I was still able to get this shape, peel it out, pull it out, wriggle it out, and then just smooth it out with some good old-fashioned sandpaper there. So there's that. And then, as you can see, I'm trying to just, just generally test fit it, make sure it's all going good in there. And then when I find out it is, I go ahead and I draw some other lines. Really, how's this thing going to fit nicely into, kind of trying to keep things lined up when I do glue that piece of styrene sheet on, as well as match any dimensions to the to that bomber profile itself. And I end up doing that. I end up cutting it free and then gluing it in place here. And then I have to cut the other side of that off after it dries in. And then I break out the magic sculpt because, as you can see, there's some molding features in this nose piece here. This is the nose interior, by the way, that I got to fill in if I'm going to make a good detailed thing. I also got to use this magic sculpt as a support for that back piece that I just made so it don't fall apart. Especially if I'm going to be using it a bit as a modeling, kind of like a support, keeping everything nice, flat, easy to see. Of course, if I wanted to do that and fit into things, I still got to, trim it all down, make it all pretty on the sides. And then I might as well fill in that gap between the bottom plastic card piece and the rest of that cockpit floor. And then, of course, knead out some magic sculpt. I was going to try to actually make the little oxygen tank thingamabits, but my sculpting skills ain't that great, so instead I go with something I think I'll be pretty good at, which is making some of those wood veneers. I decide to start with a table, give it a dark wood covering, so I cut the table bit free. But I don't cover it with wood before doing one more little thing with this bombardier section, which is to make a support for that table when I put it all back together later. So, yep. 2 pieces of that styrene strip, glued them together, then glued them in place. Sanded it down as well a little bit, that's off camera. Here I am cutting out a small piece of this wood veneer. I cut out a smaller piece so it's easier to manage, and then I realize it's humongous compared to the table piece, and as I try to trace it, the tracing doesn't go so easy and it doesn't really cut like styrene sheet. Who'd have thunk it? I should have seen that coming, so I end up nibbling through that ends up going reasonably good. I eventually trace this whole pattern. I tried to trace it again with the Sharpie, but it didn't quite, again, work out. But still, at the end of the day, I was able to cut out a reasonable facsimile of that tabletop piece. And then, after checking the fit of them, over each other, I was able to actually join the 2 pieces together with something we all used in preschool. Yep, that's white PVA glue. Elmer's glue. Nice stuff. I tried, to apply it over, to the wood. It let go the first time, so I had to apply it between the 2 things again, as you see here. But then after that, I guess what must have happened is the Elmer's glue may have sealed up, things into the wood veneer, and then made it so it was amenable to joining to the black table bit. Of course, to keep them together while drying, I put it under the tub of Magic Sculpt, I think it was a resin, and then realized I should get that off my work surface so I can actually, do some stuff. In this case, something productive, removing those horrible raised panel lines. Even though, after looking at the bomber, they seemed pretty accurate. So that's the door that I mentioned that goes, into the space between the bombardier and the pilots and stuff. So I cut that out with a jeweler's coping saw. You basically press the two ends together a little bit when to put tension on that blade, and then you cut through and you get a hole like this, which is nice that you got to clean it out. So I used a scalpel, which is my my version of an X-Acto knife because they're so goddamn cheap. And after that, cutting that out, the edges out a bit, I decided I should just break out the Dremel, really, properly shape it, and the Dremel leaves a pretty good surface finish. At least if it's got that end milling bit. Then I'm back to some scalpel work as I'm working on the insides of the cockpit. Not just that, but also filing it down. I think I may have even filed that door a little bit, too. And then, of course, I cut this piece of the cockpit, nose section off. And then I'm cutting out other pieces of the interior because I want to be able to show off the interior of this. I need to fit this interior in there. And not just according to the instructions you see on the screen, but all the other instructions, too, for all the photo etch. So there's bits that go onto all those pieces that I have to now account for. So I have to modify them to take the photo etch, and that means I use this Dremel like a milling machine on the part that goes to the cockpit. I also have to add some things that go into the bomb bay. I'll be adding more detail to that area as well. But first, a test fit, because you want to make sure things fit right and don't cause too many problems. And then, as promised, I take the Dremel and buzz over it like I'm a human milling machine. And I do pretty well. After that, you'll see me smoothing out these areas with the cement, the thin cement. You got AK in this case. I'm pretty sure it's the same stuff as the Tamiya, but I couldn't get the Tamiya. But that's life. And here I am, just again, editing out more details of the scalpel. And finally, I think this is where I break out the magic. Yep, I break out the Magic Sculpt again to fill in the holes that I've created. Now what I do is I fill in a bit with some Magic Sculpt, then I apply some extra thin super glue for a change, and then I smooth things over as best I can. That way the super glue gets into the gap between the Magic Sculpt and the plastic and holds them together very nicely. And then after that I could just either sand over as needed, or in this case as a preventative I use a piece of paper towel to draw up excess super glue. And I do it to multiple holes, so I gotta pack them in and smooth them out and all that. So, and once that's in, once that's all reasonably good, I go ahead and glue these pieces together. Now after that, I need to add some bomb bay details, as I said. So, I took more looks. That phone bit you saw me way earlier was me looking and watching, tours of the B-17 insides. So I'm trying to replicate some of that here. I make that piece a little too long because it'll help with handling and let me trim it down perfect when it's done. And then I add a bit more glue just to really get that hold good for the styrene piece. Then I take the calipers and I try to measure the distance between that styrene piece and that little bottom nib of that bomb bay section there, so that I could, I can make these two little cross beams. Now, the interesting thing is I end up getting them the wrong way when I install them into the bomb bay, but you live, you learn. It's a detail that adds something. This is not just a science, but an art as well. So there we go. I add that in, and I realize that it's a little too big, so I just trim it down, which is perfectly fine. That's a thing you usually got to do a bit with scratch building, I find. Maybe later in the future I'll do it perfect, but perfection is not what I need in my hobby today. And there we go. That's it. It's done. Dun 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 dun. Here's the outro.
Alright, so hope I edited that into something good, but righto. Along with other things for next time, got the modeling clay, so I'll be able to make that kind of interior support I'm sure I've mentioned somewhere in the ensuing video. But anywho, I am Rich. I build stuff. This has been part 2 of the B-17 build playlist, and hopefully I will see you soon. Alright. Like, share, subscribe. Hooray! Peace out.